الله. أكرر شكري للأخوان أحمد الأحمري، الأخ الشاب الوسيم سعد السماري، الشاب الملثم محمد الماجد، محمد البسيمي. عندي سؤال للجميع إذا تكرمتوا، من اللي ما يستخدم سناب شات يرفع يده؟ مرة 3 أشخاص. طيب وش رأيكم؟ ضيفنا لهذه الجلسة هو سعادة الأستاذ جايكوب ثوماس، رئيس الوكالة للتطوير في الشرق الأوسط وشمال أفريقيا لشركة سناب شات. Mr. Jacob, welcome here. We have in this hall, are you with me, gentlemen? In this hall we have just 3 people. They don't use Snapchat. They never use it. Would you like to do Snapchat right now? Okay. Let's do it with you. Mr. Jacob, this is Abdulmajid Tassan. I'm radio host at Alif radio station. Welcome here in Saudi Arabia in Arabnet conference. Welcome with us.
Thank you.
Let's start our conversation.
Shukran.
Shukran.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So let's see if this is working. So good afternoon everyone, my name is Jake Thomas. I work for Snapchat. I've been in the Middle East for about 6 years. I joined Snapchat about 2 years ago to open the office in Dubai. One of the key reasons we opened the office in the Middle East was our user base in Saudi Arabia. It's an absolute pleasure to come to Saudi Arabia every time I do. I love talking to our members, our users, and brands that also work with us. So one small caveat today, for some reason my presentation will not be appearing on these slides down here, so apologies, you will see part of my face quite a lot looking that way, so apologies for that. It is my best side, so I'm sure it'll be absolutely fine. So I'm going to talk to you about 3 things today. I'm going to talk to you about a fundamental shift in communication that's happened over the last 3 to 5 years, of which Saudi Arabia is really at the forefront of that shift in communication. I'm going to talk to you about millennials. Millennials are a topic that get discussed a lot in media and marketing and in technology. I'm going to talk to you about why millennials are important. And I'm also going to talk to you about what this means for marketers. So for technologists and marketers who want to understand how and why this shift in communication affects how they communicate with millennials. So there are 3 things I'm going to talk to you about today. So first and foremost, the way we communicate has fundamentally changed. So if you think about the last 3 to 5 years and the extreme prevalence of smartphones, there's been this significant shift, and it may have seemed subtle initially. So when you think about when you got your first desktop experiences were very much based around entering data through a keyboard. There would be a blinking cursor, it would ask your name, you would put information in. And when you think about the advent of smartphones, that experience just got taken from the desktop to a smartphone. So when you think about Blackberries, all they asked you to do was to enter details using a keyboard. But what we've seen in the last couple of years is a fundamental shift away from cursor-driven data entry to allowing people to create with pictures through the most powerful asset on a smartphone, and that's the camera. So now we really are in an era of communicating through pictures. One of the insights that drove the creation of Snapchat by our founder, Evan, was when he was 21 years old, and he'd only ever had a smartphone. If you think of a generation who didn't have a Nokia 3210, there was a frustration there that we weren't allowing people to communicate with the most inherently creative aspect of a smartphone, and that's the camera. So now we really do use that camera for communication. People talk with pictures. And that communication is happening at scale. So if you think about the native camera app on an iOS device, there is approximately 1 trillion photos taken every year on the Apple iOS camera device. There are approximately 3 billion snaps taken per day on Snapchat, which is a run rate of 1 trillion. So when you think about this idea, one of the things I want you to take away from today, this isn't something that's happening in the near future or in the future. This is something that is happening now and has been happening for some time. So people are communicating through pictures they're taking on their smartphones. So that's the first thing I wanted to talk to you about. There's been a fundamental shift in communication. The second piece is really about the audience that's driven that shift. So we talk a lot about millennials in our industry, in advertising. They're often coined as a difficult audience to understand. They want different things. They have different principles. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about why millennials are important. Now this is going to be a mix of international data and some local data, but interestingly, the local data skews even more to the narrative we're sharing with you. So There's a ton of chat about the millennial generation and the impact they're having. But interestingly, it shouldn't be unusual to say that people in their 20s define culture. If you think about every generation, whether it's music, whether it's sport, whether it's film, people in their 20s tend to define culture. And if you think about millennials in their 20s and what they did, my clicker's ceased working. Thank you very much. Millennials in their 20s are the first to really adopt ride-hailing apps, Snapchat, talking through pictures, Netflix, and electric cars. So the first thing to say, it shouldn't be unusual that these people are defining our culture. This is a generational thing. People in their 20s tend to do things a little bit differently. Can you skip the slide, please? If you want to transition again. The other thing that's super interesting about millennials that you cannot ignore, and this is US data, but they are the largest cohort or generation to exist. So there are approximately 96 million millennials in the US, or will be over the coming years. And so this is really an audience, if you're a marketer, you really, really can't ignore. Next slide, please. And there's an interesting data point on this slide which I think is fascinating. If you think about a millennial, you tend to think about kind of a difficult teenager. I think if you were trying to think of what a millennial was, and this is a fascinating data point. So if you look at the children born, so this is a forecast in the next 10 years of the children that are going to be born on this planet, 98% of them are going to be born to millennials. So if you are a marketer and trying to understand whether millennials are important to you, not only are they your customers of today in their 20s looking to buy things that people in their 20s do, they're also your parents of tomorrow, or even of today, and over the next few years. Next slide, please. Now, when you think about this region, these data points just get more heightened. So we have an extremely young demographic in this region. 40% of the population are considered millennials. Obviously, in Saudi Arabia, there is a huge skew to the under 30 population. So again, following on from this point that while millennials may seem like this kind of outlier group that is hard to understand for marketers, they're extremely large, they're going to be the parents of tomorrow, and they make up a large percentage of the population. In addition to that, they're also, in this region, the most connected and literate. So they have the highest access to GDP and the highest literary rate of any generation in the Middle East. So this audience, when you think of it over time, becomes increasingly powerful to consider. Thanks. And more than any other generation, they're connected. So while they have the spending power of tomorrow and they will be the parents of tomorrow, the way that you interact with this audience is fundamentally different to the way that you've interacted with an audience before. They are connected, they are creative, and they use social media and apps like Snapchat to communicate with their closest friends. And obviously, Snapchat is a platform that millennials live on. So when we think about how the core audience demographic for Snapchat, and particularly in this region, we have a huge reach when it comes to a millennial audience. Next slide, please. So when you think about the camera, we talked about at the beginning this idea of people communicating through pictures. The camera is so much more than that to a millennial audience on Snapchat. It's fundamentally their home screen. It's the way they can access the weather, it's the way they can access sporting results, it's the way they can access augmented reality experiences. So while it may seem fun to be able to put a pair of dog ears on your face, there's a tremendous amount of computing power that goes through the Snapchat home screen, and we really do consider the home screen, or the camera, to be the home screen of our users. Now there's some data points on this slide around the number of snaps that are created. People log on to Snapchat an average of 25 times a day. They spend around 30 minutes and create 20 snaps. We don't break out this data locally. However, anecdotally, I can tell you that those data points are significantly higher, not only for Saudi Arabia, but for the Middle East in general. By the way, my clicker's now working again, so thank you very much. I can now get back to using the clicker, so thank you for transitioning my slides. So, for those of you, so there was a show of hands at the beginning who uses Snapchat. Cool, good. Carsten, thank you for that. Not in our core demographic initially, but thank you very much, I appreciate it. So for those of you who don't, our app is simply split. One of the things that often surprises people when they haven't used Snapchat for the first time is that we open to the camera. And then there's something fundamentally different about that to other social platforms. We want to be the fastest way in which you can communicate with your closest friends. So think about that, the fastest way in which you can communicate with your closest friends. We believe people love talking with pictures, so we open to the camera. We want to put you in the mindset of creation of content rather than consumption. So rather than a lean back experience where you're just scrolling through content, we prompt you to create the moment that you enter the app. So we open to the camera, and on the left-hand side you have the messaging part of the app where you can communicate with your friends and family, and on the right-hand side we have the content side of the app where we have many of the region's largest publishers producing content specifically for Snapchat. And as I said, millennials love Snapchat, so this is our reach within the millennial community of these given markets. And there's something amazing, if you look over here, I'm also absolutely delighted that my clicker works this far away from there, and I can do that, because this cost me about 600 Riyals, this clicker, and the fact that it can do that is fantastic. Anyway, so we have a 98% reach when it comes to the millennial audience in Saudi Arabia, so that 18 to 34 group. For those of you who deal with this in this region, we know we have significant scale here. Our monthly reach is over 13 million people on a daily basis. So on a daily basis, over 9 million people use Snapchat in Saudi Arabia, which given the size of the population is a huge percentage of the population. Now, one of the things I want to talk to you about, so we've talked about the shift in communication. Millennials are really driving this shift, and the millennials live on Snapchat. One of the things I want to touch on now is this idea of augmented reality. So if you go to many events like this, many technology events, augmented reality and virtual reality are topics that are discussed a lot. And they're often discussed in this kind of like, we're approaching the future type of way. One of the things I want you to take out today is that augmented reality is fundamentally part of the way that people communicate on Snapchat now. This is not something that is kept for people who are extremely technology driven or in these closed experiences. People are playing, 70% of our users play with AR or augmented reality every month. They're using up to 3 minutes per day. Now, while 3 might not seem like a huge number, it is a magic number. Think of the amount of time if you were specifically playing with augmented reality on your phone, in the world around you, or on your face. And over 250 million snaps a day are shared which have augmented reality in them. So what does this mean for marketers? So I spend my day talking to marketers. Often those marketers are not in our core demographic, and often they don't use Snapchat on a daily basis. So we spend a lot of time talking about this idea of understanding user behavior. And one of the things we've talked about today is this idea that fundamentally the way people are communicated has changed, and millennials are driving that change, and they're communicating through pictures and using augmented reality. So for marketers, that's a big challenge. So the Boston Consulting Group recently did a study where they talked about this idea of camera marketing. And that camera marketing is going to be the next phase or the next thing to think about. And I slightly disagree because I don't think it is the next wave. I think it's a current wave. You fundamentally have to understand how people are engaging through a camera to be able to reach them. And we're going to talk about examples of brands doing that really well in a moment. Now, digital is starting to mature. We've been buying digital advertising for over a decade. And we're fixed on certain KPIs around the idea of impressions. But one of the things one of the challenges of the industry is that what does it mean to a marketer, to a brand, that you provide someone with a deep, emotional, augmented reality experience that they get to play and put on their face? That's not an impression. Someone is playing with your brand. So fundamentally, the way that you assess the success of that campaign has to be different to how you would assess a standard digital campaign. So we're going to look at a few brands who are doing it right. So I'm going to show some best-in-class Saudi examples. So as we are in Saudi Arabia, I wanted to showcase some local brands, and then I'll show you a couple of video case studies from global brands who are doing it right. So the first piece, kind of on my left, on your right, is from SDC. We have a product called a story ad, which allows you to tell a relatively deep narrative. You get to own the whole screen. And telcos are challenged at the moment because people don't just want a relationship around data. They want a relationship with the brand, and they want to understand that you understand them. So they launched a very, very entertaining story ad, which I'll play now. Oh, so I'll go back.
السلام عليكم. أنا صلوحي، واليوم بنسأل الناس بالشارع أسئلة، وإذا جاوبوا صح بنعطيهم جوال مقدم من ماي اس تي سي. سؤالنا: كيف تقدر تدخل زرافة بالثلاجة ب3 خطوات فقط؟ 3 خطوات يقطعها خطأ، بس يلا أيوة حاول تستسلم. 3 خطوات. هي تفتح الثلاجة، تدخل الزرافة الثلاجة وتسكر الثلاجة. سهل مرة، بس أنت ما فكرت كويس. سؤالنا لك، في ابليكيشن تقدر تعدل كل معلوماتك كل شيء حقت اشتراكك STC وش اسمه؟
ما STC.
مبروك عليك، فزت معنا بجوال.
Cool. That goes on for some time, so I'll bring it to a close. I've been told that's very funny. My Arabic is very bad, so my ability to understand that's pretty bad. But one of the reasons we share that, I think understanding who your audience is and understanding that the way that they use a platform is super important. So they commissioned something that was fun and creative and entertaining. The piece from Bank Al Balad, for those of you who use Snapchat will understand that you can apply filters to your own snaps. So they basically wanted to understand the context of the day. It was Eid. It gave people the ability to celebrate and share with their friends through using a geo filter. And if you look at the Jolly Chic lens, there's something fundamentally interesting about the craft on this lens. Again, Jolly Chic are an e-commerce brand, but not shying away from the ability to build augmented reality experiences. Now, the one on the end for Jebel Omar is extremely special. It's a campaign that ran during Ramadan this year. So the brief we received from Jebel Omar was the ability to allow people to experience Mecca without having to travel to Mecca. So we built what we call a world lens, which is an augmented reality experience which you project in the world and then you can walk through. So we built this experience to allow people to experience old and new Mecca. So I'll just play that now. So you flip the camera around, you point it at the world, you launch the world lens, and as you walk through the physical world, you can walk through this augmented reality experience where you get to experience old Mecca and then move through I think you'll all agree it's a pretty awe-inspiring experience to be able to see old and new Mecca, and that's the Snapchat office in Dubai. So that's whoever was taking that snap was able to walk around the office. When that actually went live, I was actually in Sri Lanka on holiday, and the depth of the lens was about 25 meters. So by holding my phone, I actually had to go down onto the beach to be able to get the length to be able to walk through the whole experience. So it's an extremely deep augmented reality experiences that we can build on Snapchat. So there's some local brands doing it right, and I'm going to show you a couple of case studies now from global brands, the first of which is Nike. And one of the things I want you to think about when you think through a kind of a marketer's lens is that augmented reality shouldn't be something that's kind of a cherry on top. You can drive genuine ROI and direct response to performance through allowing people to engage with augmented reality experiences. So let's get past them.
And Michael is backing all the way to the middle of the backcourt.
Creativity and imagination is the key. Plus, he's got to make the dunk.
To celebrate 30 years since Michael Jordan's iconic free throw line dunk, we created an experience just as iconic. By recreating Michael in 3D, we brought him back to the court. This time in augmented reality for fans around the world. Users could experience all 6'6" of Michael flying through the air, true to his pose on the court in 1988. But this was no ordinary Snapchat AR lens.
The sneaker was released on Snapchat, allowing customers to purchase the shoe on the app.
That same Snapchat lens allowed users to purchase the Air Jordan 3 Tinkers. We partnered with Shopify to power the geofence commerce experience directly in Snapchat. Interacting with MJ, users are prompted to start their purchase. Fans would have the ability to quickly pick their size, add the exclusive sneakers to their bag, and complete their order within seconds. We then leveraged Darkstore for their express last-mile delivery service to get the sneakers direct to fans in under 2 hours. Successfully creating a social commerce experience in augmented reality. The sneaker sold out in 23 minutes. The lens generated 4 times the user engagement in Snapchat, and the world looked at e-commerce in a whole new way.
So there's a couple of reasons why I love that case study. Firstly, I'm a sneaker obsessive, so I love being able to talk about sneakers on stage. Secondly, I think it gives an insight into how something which seems like it's entirely futuristic, the idea of using augmented reality, can drive like bottom of the line results and sell product. I'm going to share one more case study with you, and then I'll be pretty much done. Just by a show of hands, does anyone watch the show Game of Thrones? Or has watched the Game of Thrones? Good, good, good. Lots of hands at the back. Good, good. So I'm going to share this with you now.
Okay, so come to our watch party tonight at 8:30.
But only if you RSVP.
Only if you RSVP.
Because I will chop off your hands.
Yeah. Bye.
What are you doing? Oh my God. I'm one of them too. We are the walkers. We are the Night Kings now. Flip it, flip it.
Oh my God.
That's kind of incredible.
All that.
Game of Thrones, baby.
Cool. Thank you very much for listening, everyone. So I'm going to leave you with three things. As I said at the start, the way we are communicating with each other has fundamentally changed. We used to talk with text, we now talk with pictures. Millennials are the people that are driving that change. As a marketer, they're an audience you cannot ignore. They're your customers of today, they are the parents of tomorrow, and there's a lot of them, particularly in this region. And when you think about augmented reality, this isn't something that exists in the future. This is the way that people are communicating. And you need to understand fundamentally how people are communicating to be able to reach them with your marketing messages. So augmented reality is not simply an impression, it's how someone can play with your brand. So thank you very much for your time. I know I'm a couple of minutes over. My name is Jake Thomas. I'll be at the back for a couple of minutes if you've got any questions. Thank you very much.
We have to get selfie
Yeah.
here. Okay. Thank you so much for an amazing show.
Shukran.
One more in case. Thank you.
Cheers.
Gracias.
All right. No worries. Thank you very much, guys. No worries. You can take that off.
الآن جلستنا